So this is the concluding session. So just a little bit of summary. When we speak of fate, of course, fate has both sides. Good fate in our view and a bad fate. Whatever doesn't give us happiness, brings pain, we regard as bad fate. Maybe our value system is very different from the way divine values things. And good fate is all that brings us happiness, comfort, perhaps imprisons us, but we call it good fate. Still, the first thing Sri Aurobindo reminds us is that if we take the balance of things, in life there are many more happy moments than sad moments. But the problem is that the happy moments are taken for granted. They are just part of life, and we take it like our right. But every painful moment touches us. One thorn in 1 month is enough to make us feel flat and feel that the whole day was miserable, week was miserable, we had to take a tetanus injection. It's like the same thing, injection, just one moment. But look how much agony is associated with that. Because it strikes as an anomaly. We don't expect pain and suffering in this world. And there is a certain degree of justification in this intuition, because after all, of course, the justification is because of an intuitive sense, not logically. Logically, if we believe it's a world built by matter and matter alone, then we shouldn't bother about it, because forces of matter are brute and hard and terrible. But there is an intuition that there is in this world a divine presence. And the term that has been given to this divine presence is Sachidananda. Ananda is one of the aspects. Truth, consciousness, Ananda. And yet, when we experience in this world, we experience falsehood. We experience either Nirananda or happiness and sorrow, which are counterfeit terms of the real Ananda. They are not... Joy is not Ananda, but a counterfeit currency, not the real thing. Or we don't experience truth, but errors, half-truths, partial truths. Only time to time glimpses, far-off glimpses. In traditional theories, we have these two dimensions of evil. One is the cosmic and the second is the individual. The cosmic dimension is that there is a power, dark power, power of evil, which operates in this creation. There is hardly any explanation of how this power has come into being. There are hints in the Rig Veda, there is a hint. There are also hints in Ramayana when it is said that Ravana is the shadow of Vishnu. So there are hints that this dark power owes its origin to the divine, and it has strayed away, like the Dwarpal of Vishnu. But they are hints, not brought out with force. The bulk of the problem of evil, it's transferred to the individual. So, that's how many government systems also operate. You have to know the law. Ignorance of law is not an excuse of doing something illegal. But nobody teaches us law. So you are supposed to update yourself, keep track of everything. You have to fill the form correctly, every detail of it. And if one thing is missing, it will be returned back to you. Maybe there would be clause, subclause. So it's a complex web in which we are caught. We don't know what is the right law of living, and yet we are condemned to it. So in a large, at least the way we understand today, the theory of karma and fate, it is largely that we do something wrong and we suffer the consequence. And it's amazing. Just before, sometime before I was going to come, someone came and was telling about somebody else who is sick and said, as you, and the person remarked, as you sow, so do you reap. It's the karma of the person. Now, actually, this person is suffering. And to top it all, the karma. And what is the karma? The worst part was, the karma was that the person is friendly to someone whom the person feels is a bad person. So it was a very complicated karma, and I just had to hold back my, both a mixed strain of sadness and amusement, that how complicated we can make things. As you sow, so you reap. So everything goes back to the individual. So of course, doctors also sometimes, if you have a heart attack, problem is cholesterol. But the cosmic dimension is that we are built in such a way that it doesn't matter. The genes will make sure that cholesterol and triglycerides will accumulate in your body. And there are people genetically programmed for this. Poor fellows will not eat much, but they will grow fat. And there are quite a few who will eat a lot, but they will never grow fat. So there is a larger dimension of the problem which we are ignorant of or miss out, because it's much easier to believe that somebody's karma and therefore the reaction to this karma. Third thing in the traditional theory is that karma is a tribunal of reward and punishment. So good karma means heavenly goods. Like Indra, we will own a palace, lot of riches, outer riches, etc., etc. And if we do a bad karma, we'll be born poor, uneducated, illiterate, struggling with life. So Sri Aurobindo sets that balance right. He says pain is the hand of nature sculpturing men. So pain, the purpose of pain is not punishment. In fact, very often it's almost like a reward, but a reward we don't value. It's like schooling. So the purpose of pain is to sculpture us, to chisel us, to become heroic, to become great, mighty, strong, puissant, so that we can be prepared for the ultimate disclosure of the divine within us. Because if we are weak, we don't deserve, or the divine cannot manifest before us. Weakness, there is a beautiful line in the Upanishad, Kathopanishad, Na yamatma balhine. If one is weak, truth does not come. And again, the other day we were watching, at least I was watching Mahadev, and Sati, she is divine mother, but her body cannot hold it. It will break down. And Sri Aurobindo made this observation. He said, you have to fulfill this yoga of transformation because you are prepared like that. Her body is much more prepared. Mother's body is much more prepared. And the mother remarks, though there is so much preparation that has gone into her body, we cannot imagine that at an age when people want to retire and just sit indoors, mother could play tennis. These are not ordinary things. And the way she used to walk, if one really sees, there is so much strength and grace coming together. So her body was prepared, and yet there are experiences where the mother says, there is an experience in, I think, 61. She says, there was a tremendous power, the entire cosmic power, and it is pressing into her body. And she says, at times, I felt that the body is going to burst out. It's so difficult to hold that power. And this is for the Divine Mother, who is both inwardly, outwardly prepared. And then she gives the reason. She says, there has to be a purity in the true spiritual sense. And then she qualifies, up till the material body, the cells are pure, but the subconscious and the inconscient is yet to be purified. Now we cannot understand and imagine the cosmic aspect of the problem. So Sri Aurobindo, to start with, does not only blame man. In fact, he does not blame man at all. He says the problem is cosmic and we have to solve it at the cosmic level. In 46, when delight was drawing close and wanted to descend upon earth, she doesn't. And mother says that what it wanted from humanity was a kind of super Parsifal. It's like somebody who is integrally pure and has no taste for pleasure. Pleasure is out of the person's dictionary. And then she says, it didn't come. We did not blame it on individuals. We blamed it on the inconscient. And that's the time we see that Sri Aurobindo and the mother got into a real earnest of working on the subconscious and the inconscient. So this is the cosmic dimension of fate which we have to reckon with. Then he also says, still pain is allowed in creation because it breaks off the resistance. We are closed in small cabins and pain comes to liberate us. That's why invariably God creates, as they say, human beings in pairs. Actually, he also creates groups. And in the group, everybody has a different kind of thought. And it's wonderful because that's an opportunity to grow. If everybody thought alike, then it would be like a typical monastery where we are all wearing the same dress, doing the same thing, and not growing really, except in one dimension. So in an ashram of this kind, because the work is of this nature, he creates a variety so that we can come out. We have to perforce come out of our small little cabins and comfort zones. It's inevitable in the very nature of life here that we have to accept, assimilate all the different kinds of humanity which are represented here. So it's an amazing field for growth. So this is the other dimension, that pain comes to break a dead resistance. As long as we are happy with small things, we are not ready for great things. And if we want to rise high, then we have to solve difficult problems. For doing a PhD, we have to have a proper thesis, a much more difficult thesis. Then Sri Aurobindo speaks about the avatars who come, God's messengers who come. Now it's a very, very strange. Many times people ask, at least they have asked, that why when Sri Aurobindo is speaking about fate, he is talking about the messengers of God who have come and they have paid the price. It's not just to eulogize or say that, look, they come and they have to suffer so much. It's not for that. That is one part of it. That look, they too suffer. It's more because the problem of evil cannot be solved as long as this ignorance is not slain at its own home. And that is the real work of the avatar. His work is to enter into matter, because by coming in touch with matter, we come in touch with the subconscient and the inconscient. In the world stair, we see the description of the subtle physical world. Till then, there is not yet this touch of darkness. The forms are perfect, beautiful. But as soon as there is the next level of plunge, this is a lovely line, out of its fall, our dense matter came. So matter on earth as we experience it, by its nature, is the result of an action between these two forces. Oh, I have, anyways, thank you. Of these two forces, one, the coming from above of the divine love, grace, light, and below, the meeting of the inconscient. When these two meet, matter is formed. That's why the avatar takes a human body and pays the debt. It extracts whatever light descends into matter, it pulls it, and it's lost in oblivion. So that's why the description of the avatar, and this work only the avatar can do. Only that great descent can do. It cannot be done by an individual. So this is what we had read. So what is our role in it? Do we have a role in it or not? Page 447. We will read it again. So all who want to participate in this great cosmic work, this yoga is meant for that. This yoga is not meant for an individual moksha. There are yogas like that where out of this net one can escape. There is a possibility. If one finds the going too tough, the game too difficult, there is a door of escape. But there are those souls who want to participate in the cosmic work. And Sri Aurobindo is addressing that. Only by heart sacrifice is high heaven earned. He must face the fight, the pang, who would conquer hell. There is no shortcut. One has to face. In every yoga, there is a struggle. But in this yoga, the struggle is far more acute because each person becomes a representative of that aspect of the race. At one place, Mother says those who take to yoga already have a developed psychic being. Very often they have just one more life to cross over out of the field of ignorance. They are so close. And yet they can choose to take this line, this route of working on the cosmic dimension. It's a wonderful way to look at it, that to participate in God's labor, to be part of that great and grand scheme of things, to work on a divine project, maybe for 1,000 years. It's wonderful, because escape is, after all, a very cowardly act. So where is hell? A dark, concealed hostility is lost in the human depths, in the hidden heart of time. Hell is within us, to be sure. Heaven is also within us. But it's very inconvenient to see the hell inside us. So we see hell in others, we see hell in circumstances, we see hell in situations, we see hell in places, and we locate hell somewhere else. But hell, the fire of hell, is within us, and we have to confront it. This is our task. It's not about good and bad. Good deeds do not free us from ignorance. This is there even in traditional thought. It's a mistaken understanding in today's time that by doing good deed, you can escape from the clutch of ignorance. No, says the Gita. No, says the Veda. No, says the Upanishads. Good deed can only earn us a temporary place in heaven. In fact, Mundak Upanishad says, fools are they who want that. And then after the term is over, like the tenure, you are back. So, if we feel ever very proud about occupying a certain chair, we should know this is temporary. If today or tomorrow this is going to go away, it's like a seat. That's all that is given to us. So, that is, good deed is not the solution to escape from the fate of pain upon earth. Everybody who enters the earth zone, by the very fact he has taken a material cloak, will suffer. At least outwardly will have the blow. Suffering, of course, there is an inner aspect of suffering. One can be free. But will go through it, regardless of being good or bad. This is our dictionary, that's all. Very often, the reward of good is an increase in goodness and not something outward. And true goodness is when it is done for the sake of goodness, not because of any rewards. So this, of course, Sri clears in other places. So what really is the work of all of us? Not just talking about good deeds. That's why here we don't have free medicine, free hospitals, free clothes, free boarding, lodging, so many free things, freebies. So there is nothing like that. Of course, for inmates, because they have given their life, it's different. But nothing like, punya karma for everyone. We are not taught these things, get up in the morning, touch your parents' feet. No, because that's not something much greater, much more difficult has to be done. A secret enmity ambushes the world's march. It leaves a mark on thought and speech and act. It stamps stain and defect in all things done. Whatever, like it's a spoil sport. You make a beautiful painting, it comes and throws ink on it. Gone. Like, of course, there are people who do it. You do something nice in, of course, our view. And, some defect will always be found. And the person is alert to that defect rather than to the beauty in it. So there is always in this earth atmosphere, and it's full of that. That's why criticism of others is one of the most favorite pastimes of humanity. It's one way that this being gets so much, these beings, enemies of the divine, they get such a free play. Everybody is bad. A and B decide that C is bad. B and C decide that A is bad. And A and C decide that B is bad. Imagine if the combinations are too many, how many more things will come out. So this is how we are all the time marring God's work. And that's why Mother says that if you have nothing pleasant to say about someone in the ashram, remain silent. And then she says, this silence is faithfulness to the God's work, to the divine's work. Why? Because everybody has this aspect. That's not what is important. By talking about it, we are strengthening it more and more. But there is something else, and everyone has to confront this. One can't help it. This is a war. No soldier escapes that war. Till it is slain, peace is forbidden on earth. So when there is a war going on, one gets the blood stains. You can't help it. There is no visible foe. As long as we are thinking others are responsible for our condition, we can never truly become free. But when we decide that I am squarely responsible for my condition, Atme Vatmano Bandhu, see this line is echoed here. Atme Vatmano Bandhu, Atmane Viripuratmana. Sri Aurobindo says, there is no visible foe but the unseen. He qualifies it further. Is round us, forces intangible besiege, touches from alien realms, thoughts not our own, overtake us and compel the erring heart. This is the problem. So he is first stating the problem that man does evil because there are forces, dark, that remain in the subconscious terrains. They come up, invade our heart in a moment of weakness. They speak through our tongue and it destroys centuries' work. Our lives are caught in an ambiguous net. The Gita speaks of it as yantra rudhini maya. So how much can man be really responsible? He doesn't even know that he is a fly on the giant wheel. So when the giant wheel is going up, it says, wow, wonderful. When it is coming down, it says, oh my God, terrible. So either it blames itself or blames somebody else, but doesn't know the problem. It is glued to the wheel. So as long as we are in this lower net of forces, we are going to experience all kinds of things. It's an ambiguous net. It is also an opportunity to grow. So there is the ambiguity in it. Very often what seems good turns out evil. What seemed evil turns out to be good. Again the ambiguity. So it's a strange net, very difficult to qualify or define it. Our lives are caught in an ambiguous net. An adversary force was born of old. Now that aspect Sri Aurobindo is touching, that there is active, particularly in matter. She says that beyond matter, Mother says the hostile forces are very weak. Little bit in the lower vital they have, but as one goes higher and higher in the higher vital, the mind, they become they can just give some suggestions. They are not strong. And higher mind onwards, they have no play at all. So once one ascends to those levels or gets those touches, that light can free the mind of their action. But in matter, they have a strong grip. The cells are through and through filled with this darkness. Invader of the life of mortal man, it hides from him the straight immortal path. A power came in to veil the eternal light. A power opposed to the eternal will diverts the messages of the infallible word. How that power is born, Sri Aurobindo will talk about it later. But essentially, this power too came out of the divine. It created a space for the divine to manifest. And we know that famous story which Mother has said, that how these four original beings who came out of the divine to create, and they started feeling that we are very powerful and we alone are everything. And that's how they got cut off from the origin. And then all these four beings fell into, then the inevitable thing was separation means slowly they will be cut off from that eternity and infinity and eventually be reduced to nothing. So they entered into that state of nothingness, the dark nothingness, the dark infinite, the inconscient, and there they suddenly discovered that it's gone, everything is gone. And so they sent a cry. So consciousness became unconsciousness, truth became falsehood, light became darkness, delight became suffering. So this is how just the opposite they became. And now what happened out of their cry, once they sent a quick SMS, the divine responded super fast. He plunged into it. He, he, he gave his heart into it, his love into it. And that was the time when this love touched them. Matter was born. Now since that time, in all of us, in all things which are created, which are evolving, not about typal beings, we have a little bit of that love, mother's love, divine love. And we have also the load of that darkness. Each of us, around that crystal of love, point of love, everything got coagulated. So everybody had his own share of cross. So all of us, as Sri Aurobindo says in the Gita, Gita talks about this at great length. The asura and the retribution and eventually their change, all this the Gita speaks about. So Shri Krishna speaks about the devas and the asura. So Sri Aurobindo knows that after reading this chapter, many of my own children will say, I am deva, the other is asura, because it's always the other is asura. So he says, this distinction should not be taken too rigidly. Everybody has in him something of the deva nature and something of the asura nature. And then he says, in fact, man is a asura by birth and he becomes deva by the spiritual conversion. So by turning to the divine, this asura in us, what is that asura in us? Unconscious. Who can say that there is no unconsciousness in us? There is plenty at every level, mental, vital, physical, leave aside subconscious, falsehood. Every fiber and fabric of nature is shot through and through with falsehood. It twists truth. Falsehood is not just telling lie. That's the most benign form of falsehood. Opposing the truth, twisting truth just to suit our own convenience. So these are various forms of falsehood. Suffering. Asura creates a gospel of suffering. And there is something of that in us, even a perverse love for suffering at times. So there is in all of us that darkness, unconsciousness, and only by turning to the divine, we can get free from it. A whisper lures to evil the human heart. So now he puts things in the right perspective. That basically it is not man who does the karma, but he is driven by forces of darkness towards evil. So at least now we understand what the real problem is. That needs to be tackled. It seals up wisdom's eyes, the soul's regard. It is the origin of our suffering here. It binds earth to calamity and pain. Even to her children, whom the mother had always granted special protection and continues to do that, she would often advise that if you, at least to someone, she said that all the time you are moving out of my protection. Don't do that. There is a protection, but if one willfully moves out of the protection, does things which completely carry us away, that's why Christ, when he is told, if there is God and you have faith in him, why don't you jump? The devil lures to him. It is a very good lure. Oh, I have faith. So God will save me even if I jump inside a well. But why should you jump in the well to test God? If you fall in a well, can't help it. So Christ says one should not tempt the God, my Lord. That's not the way. So this is not the approach to take that route. It is the origin. It binds earth to calamity and pain. This all must conquer, who would bring down God's peace. If this we believe is our mission, or part of our mission to participate in Sri Aurobindo's work, So everywhere we do mother's work, and mother's work is done in so many ways. Of course, it has its own purpose. But even in mother's work, in centers, people do mother's work and fight with each other very badly. So one person says, I am doing mother's work, and the other person says, no, I am doing mother's work. The real work is to fight that I which is intervening. But so difficult. I am the only one. This is the right way. This is the only way. Whereas actually this is created so that we can pick up this I which is constantly raising its head. This is the real war. But we are always fighting outer war. This all must conquer, who would bring down God's peace. Without this, there will be no peace. This hidden foe, lodged in the human heart. Conveniently, it had disguised itself. What are the masks it wears? The most common mask is self-justification. And mother said, very often people will say, well, I can't change its nature. It's my nature. Then yoga of transformation is meaningless. She says there are theories like that. This is nature, that is divine. Or another, everything is done by the divine. Everything is mother. So then again there is no issue, nothing to be changed. When somebody said this to Sri Aurobindo, that isn't all mother only. He says, yes, but you must understand that here she is representing the higher nature and not the lower nature. So if you surrender yourself to the impulses of lower nature, then you can't say that it's mother who is driving me to do things. So it's such a tricky thing. So many justifications can come. And worst justification is when we quote Mother and Sri Aurobindo and justify. We all know that we have really read one small bit and it appeals to us, but there is something else. They have written just the very opposite. So, but that is for someone else. So there is a total truth, and it's so difficult for the human consciousness to comprehend. So many ways this foe is hidden inside us, which prompts us. Man must overcome or miss his higher fate. This is the inner war without escape. So this is the real battle. Hard is the world redeemer's heavy task. So that's why the divine doesn't come only to solve individual problems. When we participate in the divine mission, it means we are part of a cosmic problem and a cosmic solution, and it should make us feel happy. If we only want individual solutions of my everyday affairs of life, then, there are so many ways to get it. The world itself becomes his adversary. Those he would save are his antagonists. Whom he comes to save? All these asuras. Strange but true. Sri Aurobindo says that many of those who are very close to me are asuras. The greater the disciple, the greater the asura. This he wrote in a private correspondence to Nalnida. Nalnida published it. And then Kishore Gandhiji had a problem that if you write such things, who will give money? Because they will say they are all asuras. Now, this is not the total truth. The total truth is that they have come for conversion. And the mother has said that. She has said the asura of unconsciousness and darkness has accepted the conversion, and he is doing a wonderful work for the divine. She has even said a converted asura is far more useful to me than an innocent angel. All this they have said. Purva Deva, they have to be rescued. So this is part of the work, difficult work, challenging work. But divine doesn't come to do easy work. After all, garima, divine की भी तो गरिमा होती है क्या छोटा मोटा घर द्वार देने के लिए. He doesn't come only to give us some house and money and some which even the loans, government loans can give. He comes to give us something which we just cannot imagine, that parasmani, that alchemist touch which can transform suffering and pain. This world, but what is his problem? This world is in love with its own ignorance. So what is our role? Our role is to transfer allegiance from lower nature to the higher nature. This is our role. At one place, the mother says that Sri Aurobindo told me that if there is no surrender, it will take thousands of years for the supramental light even to come down into the mind. But if there is surrender, it can come very fast, right up to the subconscient and inconscient, and purify it. So this is our work. That's why at the end of it, what is yoga? Okay. Open to the mother. Open to the mother. And if we just take this one mantra, means all other things to which we are open, we have to close the doors. Because if we are open to everything else, how I can be open to mother? So this is such a simple mantra and applies everywhere. And the mother made it even more simpler. She said the best way to work on the subconscient and the inconscient, which is the real enemy, that's what we are here to fight. Not each other, not just do good deeds of piety, charity, put our names in big letters. Not for that, but for fighting this battle in the subconscient and inconscient. So Sri Aurobindo gave a more general way, open to the mother. And mother said, simply repeat your mantra. It has the effect on the subconscient and the inconscient. It is the only method which can help the subconscient and the inconscient to become ready for the change. But we love ignorance and darkness. That is the problem. Instead of loving the divine. If you could just love the divine, its darkness turns away from the savior light. The history of yoga, even here, is full of people who came and went away because it's too much to bear that. And though later on one feels the loss, and yet it's too much to bear that light, that pressure to change. So it turns away from the savior light. It gives the cross in payment for the crown. His work is a trickle of splendor in a long night. He sees the long march of time, the little one. A few are saved, the rest strive on and fail. A sun has passed on earth, night's shadow falls. So what humanity does, so many places Sri Aurobindo has written, once the sun has passed, it picks up those little rays of light or the gleamings and adds to it its own shadow and turns it into a beautiful religion, a well-rounded religion. That's, Sri Aurobindo says in one of his places, they erected Christianity on the dead body of Christ. That's how humanity does. Christ is forgotten. I mean, he's there in the church inside. And every Sunday there is a mass and hallelujah. It's the same thing is done in temples. Mosques everywhere. The truth is forgotten. The truth of inner battle. How Christ stood up for all who were oppressed and facing danger and mortal death, yet stood up for truth and love. That life we don't want to live. How Krishna sacrificed everything for the sake of the great battle of the future. Sri Aurobindo and the mother. But we turn it into religion because that is very convenient. So this is one way that the sun passes and the night's shadow falls. Of course, they have assured us this won't be this time. Yes, there are happy ways near to God's sun. But few are they who tread the sunlit path. Only the pure in soul can walk in light. There is a route. One doesn't have to go through this pain and suffering. Divine does not like it. So when people say mother is testing, this is one of the biggest falsehoods. When mother was asked, she said, my child, I know you. I don't need to test you. If I test you, you won't stand anywhere. And about these lines, someone asked the mother, only the pure in soul can walk in light. Mother, I want to be such a soul. Who are these? Mother says, in this world of misery and ignorance, this state can be bestowed only by grace and nothing else. Not by human tapasya. Sunlit path is the path of love for the divine. It is the path of opening to grace. So it is not a path where, okay, sunlit path, I'll become pure and walk the sunlit path. Few people tried it. Jatayu's brother Sampati tried to walk the sunlit path by his own tapasya. Burnt his wings, though he got tremendous power in his eyes, as no other vulture, but he dropped. Another was Hanuman, by his own power, and he lost all even the memory of his who he is. It's not possible. And he is a superhuman being. He's not ordinary. He's born from he is one of the Rudras, born from that fiery energy of Shiva. And yet, so sunlit path is only by grace. And this is the lesson even Swami Vivekananda towards the end. He just says, Mother, I am a child, take me in your arms. That Swami Vivekananda, who suddenly would appear as a vast light of jnana, towards the end becomes like an infant in the Divine Mother's lap. So the sunlit path is the path of love for the divine and grace. But only few can do it. An exit is shown, a road of hard escape from the sorrow and the darkness and the chain. But how shall a few escape release the world? Yes. There are paths where we can escape from this misery individually. But that is not a solution to the cosmic problem. Some people say that one day all the souls will wake up and all of them will escape. That's a fantastic solution. almost saying that it is never going to happen. All the souls. What is possible is that Earth's atmosphere can be cleaned so much. It's the same thing, Swachh Bharat. So one option is we go to countries which are very clean. How many can go? After a while, if too many people go, then the other countries will start putting strict immigration laws. Why? Because, people say there is so much cleanliness in that country, this country, every country, except India, it seems, is clean. So, road of escape. So you get your H1, H4, whatever B visa, not H1N1, that's a virus. So you get the visa and fly off. And you say, so clean. India is a dirty country. Well, we didn't try to solve the problem. So what is the problem? To clean where we are living. Wherever we are, this is my place. How can one leave the mother because she's dirty? We need to do something about it, and we have to do it. Whatever time it takes, whatever effort it takes. So this is the solution. But in India, Mayawadi is so prominent that everybody is thinking about his immediate issues and immediate relief. So this is same thing here, that in spiritual life there is a shortcut solution which is okay for individuals. But it leaves the cosmic problem just as it is, perhaps worse, because those who could have perhaps worked upon it have chosen that door. And last few lines, they're beautiful lines. The human mass lingers beneath the yoke. Escape, however high, redeems not life. Life that is left behind on a fallen earth. Escape cannot uplift the abandoned race or bring to it victory and the reign of God. So this is no solution. It's like saying that a doctor should learn medicine, 10 years of all that struggle, only so that he can cure himself. Because if he goes into the hospital, he exposes himself again to illness, this, that. He'll say, I've learned now, I can cure myself, maybe my family relatives. That is the solution. I will learn a technique, a method, so that I can escape. Others, that's not my problem. It is as much my problem because others are not others, but the same self extending into all. So if one loves the divine, one loves the creation, one loves all. And if one wants to serve the divine, one has to serve creation and serve all. This is the logic. So here, escape cannot uplift the abandoned race or bring to it victory and the reign of God. A greater power must come, a larger light. So this kind of a spirituality which is largely born from the spiritual mind, which will open a door of escape, this is not enough. something else must come. Although light grows on earth and night recedes, yet till the evil is slain in its own home, and light invades the world's inconscient base, and perished has the adversary force, he still must labor on, his work half done. So till the inconscient is changed, transformed, till then the work of the mother will go on. This is the labor, this is the real work, and this work, every one of us has a share of this work, because all of us have the psychic, which is nothing else but crystallized love of the mother. That's why it feels love for the mother. The more the psychic awakes, nobody has to tell it, love the mother. It's not, it spontaneously feels love, because it's made of love. It's drawn towards that alone which is its own like. Whereas every one of us have our own share of darkness. And we have to touch this darkness with this love, love of the mother. Open the doors to our light and love. Allow it to invade into our darkness. It will rise up in revolt and reaction. And we have to go through this process. It will create impossible difficulties. Yet we have to know that with the divine touch, everything is possible. Everything is possible. So we'll continue in August, Sri Aurobindo's birthday. There is a lovely line on which we have stopped. So it will be appropriate for starting. One yet may come, armored, invincible. So that of course is Sri Aurobindo. We'll have a brief meditation, just a few minutes. Samprasad.